So the way things are here inside of our create user in our login screen view model, notice that we kind of hacked our way through to creating a user by saying mutable map of and saying key is string and the value is any. So this works fine because we're just testing things out and getting, in this case, the Raphael, display name, and user ID, and it's fine. So, but that's not sustainable because we want to have an actual model that we can create. So we can use that model to actually have an actual user, okay, object. So let's do that. Let's go to our project and change this to Android. Inside of our project, let's go to our model here, and it's going to be just a data class, just a simple one. I'm going to say MUser. Now the reason I'm appending M, or could it be any letter, is because I'm not just going to say user as it is, because Firebase also has a user object. So just to not have contrast or clashes with Firebase, we're just going to say M, append M, send user, like this. All right, we have our data class. So what do we want to have in our data class? Well, this is going to model after an object of a user, an instance of a user that we can then pass along here with all these fields. So I'm going to say val, each user has an ID, it's going to be a string type, get a nullable there, and each string has a user ID, each user has a user ID, a string, I'm going to val display name, going to be a string, and we're going to have a avatar URL as well if we wish to do so, and we're going to have a quote that the user can have that they can add to their profile if we wish to do so also, profession. So this is just the basics. Okay, you can add more, but for now this is fine, and it doesn't mean we can use or we have to use all of these. All right, now I'm going to also add some helper methods or function inside here, because remember, we want to be able to create a user object, something like this, right? Different than this, of course. But remember that for Firebase, or Firestore in this case, in order for it to be able to store that data, we need to pass in this format as a mutable map, right? A hash map per se. So for that, what we are going to do is we're going to create a helper function inside here. It's a fun, and I'm going to call this to map. What this will do, it will just convert the object, our user here, into map. All of its properties, its fields are going to be converted into map, which is the type that we need. So I'm going to say mutable map like this, going to be string key, and just any for the value, because it could be anything as such. All right, so this will return, in this case, a mutable map of. So now I'm going to create this structure, something like this, right? We're going to have a key and then add the value and so forth. So what would be the key? So the first key is going to be user underscore ID, because this is how they will be saved, right? This key as such, okay? So we have to be consistent with what we're creating in terms of the keys especially, how we name them. So I'm going to say to, this is how we connect this user ID to this that user ID at the top there. And then I'm going to say display. Let's see, did we say display name underscore? Yes. Display name, say to this that display name, and then quote to this that quote profession, this that profession, and then avatar underscore URL to this that avatar URL, like this. So this is going to be great, because then we can say MUser and pass all of these IDs and everything. So what this will allow us to do is whenever we want to create an object, right, in this case user object, then we can just invoke it, and then we can say username, so muser.username, and pass in the username and so forth. And then you will see we can say to map, which will invoke this to map here to then to then create this immutable map that will map all of these IDs, user ID, and so forth into a map that is needed to be able to save in our backend. Okay, so that's all we need to do for now here. So let's go back to our login. So coming here, we can just change, it's going to be the same, we can just change the dynamics here. So here I can just create a val user. Instead of doing this, I can just instantiate directly our MUser as such, and then I'm going to pass all of the properties. So the first property is the ID. Now the thing here about the ID is that we don't need to pass it, because remember, these IDs are going to be generated naturally, because these IDs are going to represent each one of these document ID. So we don't need to pass anything when we're creating a user for that matter. So we can ignore that. But next we are going to say, let's see what else comes after that. User ID. So say user ID. In this case, I'm going to pass our user ID that we have. And then let's pass display name. It's going to be display name. And then avatar URL. For now, I'm just going to give it nothing. And then quote, I'm going to give, say something like, life is great. Profession, I'm just going to say Android developer. All right, let's go ahead and fix this. Looks like this needs some help. Let's just say call to string, so we know exactly what we're dealing with. Either way, add null or asserted, that's fine, but let's just say toString. All right, so now we no longer need any of this. And it's calling for ID. We're just going to go ahead and pass null like this. There we go. So now we have our user object. So this will do the same thing that we did before. Because I have MUser here, once I've created the object, I'm going to invoke that toMap method or function there, which is going to map everything into a map, as the name implies, and then we should be good. And before we move forward, let's go and find splash screen, because this is not going to work for us, because we will have to, of course, actually take ourselves just to log in, because we want to be able to create a new account so we can test things out. Okay. And the other thing earlier, what I did, I just went ahead and cleared the user. So all the users just start from afresh, so we don't have anything. And I think now it's time for us to give it a try. So let's run this. Should go to login screen. Good. Let's go to sign up. Okay. Let's say j@me.com. And let's go ahead and create an account. Okay. Went in very nicely, and you can see now we have J, and voila. Avatar URL is empty. J, developer, life is great, and we have indeed our user ID as such. So now we can make use of our MUser as such, okay, instead of having to manually do all the work.